I'm Argus, Vice President at JFF, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our online event, Creating More Quality Jobs, Centering Workers in the Rebuilding Agenda, co-hosted with our good partners at Turning Basin Labs. Thank you for joining us. And as I make my opening comments, I invite you to go ahead and type into the chat and introduce yourselves. We'd like to know who's here joining us today. I think we're going to have a good crowd. So thanks for taking the time. You know, it's a timely event in our view because, you know, as California and the nation get to the work of rebuilding our economy during and after the pandemic, there's an important opportunity, and it's really an imperative to focus on worker voice and job quality, especially as COVID has exposed and exacerbated inequities tied to the future of work, a future that in fact is here now. We've got a lot of content to share today, which will just scratch the surface of these issues in our short time together, but please know we intend to organize more conversations to go deeper in the future. Let's just get a sense of who's in the virtual room with us today, and we'll do a poll. You should be able to see this now in the chat and be able to respond. What sector are you representing today? Please go ahead and take about 10 seconds to respond before the poll closes and we share some results. So we have about 17% from community-based organizations and advocacy groups, about 4% from education, 4% from government, 4% from the investor community, and let's see, 2% from philanthropy. This is a great group here. 9% from the private sector and 17% from workforce development and 9% other. Well, great diversity today. Thank you so much, again, for joining us. Just want to say a quick word about JFF. We're a national nonprofit organization with a team located in Oakland, which is hosting the call today. And we're dedicated to building a society in which everyone has the skills, resources, and credentials they need to achieve economic advancement by driving transformation in our workforce and education systems. We do this by designing evidence-based solutions, scaling up these solutions through our national networks, investing in incubating and accelerating new solutions, and shaping and influencing policy, conversations, the national dialogue, and action among corporate, workforce, education, and government leaders. Next slide, please. Now, a word about our Future Ready California network, about which you'll learn more shortly. It's a cross-sector network of a diverse array of such leaders from across the state, all focused on creating the conditions for shared regional prosperity. Next slide, please. So achieving those conditions for shared regional prosperity requires striving for economic development that's inclusive of communities traditionally left out and inequitably impacted traditionally by decisions driving economic growth. So this means focusing not only on attracting business and jobs through external growth strategies, but working to build on the internal assets of communities, investing in people, you know, that is a community's human capital, and strengthening the places that support people and economies. So next slide, please. We're gonna show a quick little video about this approach. It elucidates a little bit more on what I was speaking to. Please go ahead and roll that.
California is home to some of the wealthiest people in the country. Yet throughout our state, communities struggle to make ends meet. While the economy is working for some, many people, especially those within historically marginalized groups, are not experiencing the same benefits. Wage stagnation and rising income inequality limit opportunities to learn, work, and build wealth in order to gain economic mobility. To make matters worse, communities without skilled workers can't attract high-quality jobs or impactful investment, perpetuating a cycle of underemployment and financial insecurity. But it doesn't have to be this way. California needs inclusive economic development, the creation of an equitable and resilient economy that everyone can contribute to and benefit from, no matter who you are or where you live. Of course, this is no small task. Economic advancement for all requires collaboration by all, because no one organization or sector can do it alone. We need leaders working together within business, education, government, and most importantly, the communities affected by economic distress. Because if we want to truly create a solution that works for everyone, we need to include everyone's voices in the process. The Future Ready California Network is an action-oriented community of leaders collaborating across sectors to drive inclusive regional growth. Progress is already underway in communities throughout the state, where network members are creating bottom-up, place-based strategies to address neighborhood challenges. By thinking differently about growth, people, and place, we hope to turn our ideas into a movement for building resiliency and advancing shared prosperity in communities. Inclusive economic development in California is possible, but depends on our ability to work together. We hope you'll join us as the Future Ready California Network continues to work toward achieving economic advancement for all.
Okay, thanks for taking a minute to view that, or a couple of minutes. I'm going to move us on to the main event, which is a conversation about an important dimension of inclusive economic development. Our aim today is to explore the importance of including worker voice in all levels of decision-making. We're going to elevate business models that prioritize worker well-being, leverage the power of cross-sector collaboration to share and spread strategies for job quality and worker agency, just to paraphrase those objectives. And now, without further ado, now I'd like to turn to our good partner, the Managing Director of Turning Basin Labs, Stephen Bediako. Stephen.
Thanks, Joel. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Bediako. I'm the Managing Director of Turning Basin Labs, and really excited to be here with colleagues from JFF, all colleagues who've been involved in this work, and for everyone who's attending. And also just want to acknowledge that, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and, just want to recognize those who've been impacted, those who are working to continue to support us to start to rebuild, as Joel mentioned. What I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about Turning Basin Labs, and then also introduce you to the project and to the session that we've got planned today. So Turning Basin Labs is a staffing agency. We are worker-owned. We're a co-op platform based in the East Bay, focused in California. We primarily support low-income contractors, but we support all workers, 1099 and W-2. And we help them to find what we're describing increasingly as research and development roles. So this means that we work with California employers on an on-demand basis to meet their needs, but we're also placing workers in groups to conduct significant research exercises, solve a problem, or think about a short, medium, long-term challenge in the California system. And again, we're very new, we're young. We've been supported by the Irvine Foundation, and so really excited to be here and to be part of this work and have been part of this journey. So just to give you a little sense of the High Road Employment Project and where it came from. So really the project was born from both Turning Basin Labs and JFF being part of Irvine's Better Careers program. Myself and the team at TBL then connected with JFF at Future Ready Network event, right? We were part of that network and saw the amazing work that they were doing, and realized that there was some alignment there between our commitment to putting workers to work and JFF's commitment to kind of innovation, research, and policy. So an emerging hypothesis started to develop, which is kind of like, there's lots of good work out there around worker rights, influencing industry, changing policy. But, we wanted to explore if there could be more to be done to influence the flow of capital. Right? Could more capital be flowing with workers' interests centered in it, or as part of that investment thesis? So we kept talking, and so we designed and stood up this project that we're going to tell you about today. And really, it's right? You need to kind of start by trying to understand, is there a need, right? Is there a space? Are there people doing this already? Could we add anything? So a core part of the research was speaking to partners and other impact investors, both in the US, in California, and actually around the world to explore this. And I want to give a shout out to Karen who's not joining us today, but who led that work from the JFF side along with Alison. At TBL, we're committed to our workers innovating. So we push the idea of what I would describe as worker researchers. In other words, what would it mean to do more than just consult workers on this question, right? What would it mean to facilitate, our workers to lead the research exercise and to come up with a framework that would influence the shaping and development of this fund? So, we set that team, we set that hypothesis. We had the support of JFF and Tenney Basin Labs and our shared backer. And we also set up an incredible advisor group that I also want to recognize for their support and challenge along the way. And I'm not going to do any spoilers on the learning or the findings, because that's coming in the next session. But me, there's just something in all of this about ownership, and what does it really mean to share ownership, especially with our workers. So after 4 months, you're going to hear some of the learning, and it's been groundbreaking, but it's not over. We are just, we are in our journey. We're moving phase 2, starting in December, and we're hoping as many of you as possible will get involved and support and collaborate with us on that. But essentially, in the next session, you're going to see and hear from Alison and Danny and Elsa and the team around that work and where it's got to. And then the second session, and I'll be kind of in that session along with a couple of colleagues, Kirk and Kimberly, where we'll just be exploring ownership models and business models and the role that they could play as part of a broader recovery. And the final session, you'll be hearing from Anna and Labour Secretary Julie and one of our team, Marty, just around what are the policy implications for this work and also what's happening at state level. So really pleased to have Julie here providing that perspective, but just also honoured to work on this project with everyone, and really pleased now to share this. And I think I'll just close out by saying, we just got a new president, Joe Biden, who wants to save the soul of America. And I'd say, well, the soul of America is its working people. And it's time for, working people to have a say in policy, in organizations, in how capital flows, and to start getting that a little bit more balanced. So I hope you will join us on the journey. And without any more from me, I think I'm going to hand over to Alison to take us into the first session. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And you can go ahead, Molly, to the next slide. So hi, everyone. My name is Alison Schmitt, and I'm a senior program manager with JFF. I'm so honored to have with me today 3 members of the research team from Turning Basin Labs for the first of our 3 conversations today. So we have Elsa, Leneka, and Danny here. We're only going to be able to scratch the surface with this conversation, so please put your reactions, your questions in the chat so we know how to tailor some of our future conversations. We might not have time for audience Q&A, but we will capture all of your questions to help drive our future learning agenda as a network. And so now that you've heard a bit about the project from Steve, we're going to dive right into the research findings. So this team spoke with over 50 workers in California to understand how they would define a quality job and ideal work environments. So Elsa, I'm going to start with you. So through your research, you found the word career was limiting for interviewees. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So in my early rounds of conducting interviews, I noticed that a lot of my interviewees shied away when the word career was brought up. They basically responded in a way that downplayed their job experience thus far in their lives, or altogether said that they had not had a career whatsoever. In other words, they disqualified themselves as individuals with actual valuable career experience. It occurred to me that this might be because of the connotations the word career has come to have in a lot of our communities. This goes for our communities, the communities that we as worker researchers come from, and the communities that our worker interviewees are from, which is low income, first generation, formerly incarcerated, undocumented, and Black and Latinx. All of my interviewees identified as one or more of these, and several of them had expressed a sense of alienation from this word career. at this point in the project. So this let me know that this was a pattern worth investigating. After reflecting on this, I decided it was important to name and acknowledge that a lot of us have had or received colonial and white supremacist programming around what having a career means or can look like. For example, when you hear the word career, how many of us associate it with the corporate world, large salaries, high-rise buildings, or wearing power suits? I know that that was me. And so I asked myself, how many of our interviewees who have a low-wage working background does this concept or construct of a career exclude? So I consulted with Karen. Shout out to Karen. She was our terrific worker researcher coordinator at the time. And we agreed that I would change the language in my interview questions and bring this up to the rest of our team to have a larger conversation around language and interview practices for the project. One of the changes that I suggested for our interview guide was expanding upon a question that we already had, such as, can you tell me about your career experience up to now? With questions like, what have you done to support yourself in the past? And what comes to mind when I mention the word career? What is your relationship to the word career? Can you describe how you feel it applies to you and your work experience thus far? Why or why not? As a result, I believe these changes gave my interviewees a kind of space to elaborate on their work experience that we did not give them before. Importantly, I think it allowed them to define a career on their own terms. As one interviewee taught me, what a career meant for her was work that she envisions herself doing long term, as well as that work being something she loves doing. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks so much, Elsa. Yeah, that's such an important finding and something that a small tweak can make a big impact. So now I'm going to turn to Leneka. And from your research and experience, how often are workers asked for their opinion about designing solutions to challenges in the workplace?
Yes, thank you, Alison. One of the participants that I interviewed is an ambassador for the downtown Oakland area, and he interacts with the homeless and other safety issues that are happening in the downtown Oakland area. He gave an example of how he made a recommendation to have an Oakland police officer assigned to respond to their calls because of the long waiting periods that they were experiencing as ambassadors in the area. And he was thinking of a partnership between the two agencies, but he stated that his recommendation didn't get far enough because the corporate office is in New York and his supervisor wasn't responsive to the needs. So there was no access to those in power. In my own experience, I worked in a position where we came across various challenges. And during one of our team meetings, the director asked if anyone had any ideas or thoughts on how to deal with a particular situation, and asked that those who had thoughts and ideas to email her. And she was going to take into consideration those recommendations. For me, when I emailed her, it was odd because she responded and said that she would be handling the situation on her own, and rejected my thoughts on the situation, but then ultimately decided to follow through on what it was that I had recommended. So there has to be a genuine willingness to be open to having these conversations with the workers on the front line.
Thanks, Leneka. Yeah, and I know in your summary report of findings that really came out of, that ability to have autonomy in voicing some opinions in the workplace. So Danny, let me turn to you now. So one of the next steps coming out of this project is to set up an investment fund that invests in worker-centric businesses. So what should be considered for including workers in that process? And what are some of your overall reflections from this project?
It's been many really involved months of research. And I think as Stephen set it up, we really wanted to be very intentional and check our assumptions every step. And the outcomes could have been so-so. We recognize starting in, because this is a very important and involved area, workforce development, human capital, and the sort of allied areas. But we invested a lot in the process. And now at this point, after this first phase, we have a lot of insights and relationships that set us up well for that second phase, developing some kind of investment fund for these better employment models. And I think one insight from our work so far really illustrates this point, that we're well set up. In my role, I'm facilitating and training the person for the worker research team. And so I was here to support them conducting and analyzing the interviews, developing the frameworks, iterating on interview guides, and coming up with something to look at when we want to ask ourselves, what are quality jobs from the worker's perspective? And the main point in that was this framework combines what's been extensively described of in the workplace, right? Dress code, micromanagement, racial and gender discrimination, and so on. And we put that in opposition to another concept that's been described and a lot less studied of having ownership, specifically having ownership like this feeling of being your own boss, which is a good feeling, and the more material and economic version of ownership, which is having a financial stake in the business you work with or for, right? And so now those findings in that one in particular set us up now to look at better employment models worth investment, again, from the worker's perspective. You'd want to work in a place where you feel that you are invested and they invest in you. And it was the worker researcher leadership, Leneka's point specifically about this identity of being policed, this phenomenon, the way it was described, that came out in the interviews. And the more we looked, the more we saw it across a lot of other people's experiences. And then there's a bunch more to the framework that you can see described in the blog post, which was dropped in the chat a little bit ago. So looking forward to the next phase of work, which is creating an investment fund to support or maybe to persuade some of these employment models to in the direction that the workers and a lot of us, I think, even for our own sake, want to see. It's also going to be a lot of work, and it's going to involve worker oversight. So that means education sufficient to make informed decisions about starting and running a fund, which is some of us here are still struggling with, even if we're in those roles of leading investment funds. And it's going to involve having workers in a place of power, similar to being on the board of a company, which we strongly believe is going to lead to better outcomes from these investments and better outcomes for everyone. Part of me is surprised that this model of having worker leadership and worker oversight isn't more common, but part of me is also not surprised in a way. And I think we're really moving in that direction. I think we've found something novel that we can embrace and we can move into this next phase of work with.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, I know that's one of the things that we're finding people, there's really energy around this idea of including workers in the design, the advisory of this type of fund. And so, Leneka, let me turn to you now. So if you're thinking about this experience on you personally, how would you say that this experience as a researcher has caused you to reflect on how you would define a quality job?
For me personally, there would definitely need to be inclusive conversations. Work that I'm involved in. It's important for me to work in a job where I see the same diversity on the top as I see on the bottom. Particularly this research project that I've been a part of, it was an eye-opening experience for me. A lot of the time that I spent talking to the participants and the people that I interviewed, there were two main things that came up, and it was just, wanting to feel like their voices were heard and this need to, feel that, hey, my health matters, hey, my family matters. And during our work on this particular project, I know that a lot of health issues came up for myself as well as for my son. And in fact, he had contracted COVID-19. He's 17 years old. And that was just a really rough time for us. And we were, right in the heart of this project. And I was just, my team as well as the lead of this work had just, made me feel like, okay, you have to take care of yourself. And, it's like I was still trying to be part of this project, but I was told, like, prioritize your family and, we'll be here. And I was offered the opportunity to work in whatever capacity that I could. So I was still able to, be a part of this project, which I cared about, and still tend to my family and my health needs. So, I just was, even reflecting on this work and was just saying like, wow, a lot of the things that, the people are asking for that I'm coming across is just this need to feel prioritized. And so through this work, it was just like, wow, I felt prioritized. And then, they also had mentioned that, they wanted to be heard, and, their opinion, they wanted to know that their opinions mattered in the work that they were doing. And even in reflecting on how I was able to engage in this work here, it was like, okay, as a worker researcher, I was often asked, well, what's working, what's not working? What are your thoughts on this? What questions do we need to, revise? And so it was a constant engagement that, I felt like my voice mattered. So moving forward, I know that, any other projects that I'm a part of or work on, that I would, definitely need that same level of, care and concern and inclusion.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, Leneka. And Elsa, I'm going to ask you the same question. So, yeah, how has this experience been? How is it causing you to reflect on how you would define a quality job?
Oh, thank you so much, Alison, and thank you so much, Leneka, for everything that you said. I echo that 100%. That care and concern, and that intentionality, I think, has been part of my experience with on this project as well. I would say working at TBL has helped me define a quality job as one that values my work. And one example that I have of this is working with TBL. This is the highest paid that I've ever had. And I'm undocumented. So this is really, I would, to borrow Leneka's language, has been an eye-opening experience for me to know what is possible, what workspaces who are committed to the communities that they claim to serve, what the possibilities of what that looks like for me as an undocumented worker. And this includes the learning and education process. So I had, coming into this process, I'm a student at UC Berkeley. This really was my first position formally working in any type of research capacity. Although I'm learning about it in the classroom, it's a very different thing to actually be working hands-on in a research project for an actual organization, for a nonprofit, right? With real, interviewees and et cetera. So I had no idea how to use some of the programs that we ended up using, which are Dovetail and Otter. And these are both like data analysis tools. So I'm still learning. It has definitely been a learning process, and it felt incredible to know that there was a team that was really genuinely invested in my learning process. Like, it didn't necessarily matter that it didn't come in, like I didn't walk in through the door with this experience. They were there for me throughout the learning process. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, and like I've already said, my teammates on this project and supervisors, Karen, Steve, Danny, all treated what I had to say, and what I have to say, with genuine interest and importance. So that also helps me define a quality job. Yeah, and also, I fortunately did not have contract COVID myself, but I had other life situations that came up that resulted in me delaying my part of the project. And I've to this day I've received nothing but support from my team, and moving forward and making adjustments to the timeline as needed. And the last thing I'll say is working at TBL has helped me define a quality job as one that not just believes in, but lives out their values with its workers.
Thanks so much for that, Elsa. It's really fantastic. And I know I've personally learned so much from this research team. And I'm excited that, the work's not done. We're just starting. We, are about to enter phase 2, where we take some of the research findings and translate them into what's next. And, how do we use that to inform our investment criteria for the types of companies we want to support and build up. And so I know I'm seeing in the chat some really good discussion about language. What alternatives do we have to calling workers low-wage workers? I'm seeing underpaid workers. So just, really great conversation. I know that's not the last we'll hear from all of them, but just taking a minute now, if you wouldn't mind all typing into the chat, how could this type of participatory research inform your work? Any ideas come to mind? I'm seeing a few come in. So as people continue to reflect and answer, we can take us to the next slide. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Steve again.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you to everyone who participated in that last panel. It was a fantastic conversation, and yeah, thanks to everyone who's engaging in the chat and providing thoughts and feedback and learning. I really appreciate it. So this next conversation, I'm going to be joined by 2 wonderful leaders in California, Kimberly Alvarenga, who's the director of California Domestic Workers Coalition, and Kirk Vartan, who's general manager and founder of Slice in New York, and really explore the question of business models, and especially kind of co-op and shared ownership business models. Again, I want to recognize that we are still very much in a pandemic, and part of this is now more than ever before. COVID has shown that we're only stronger when we work together. And so the concept of co-ops and shared ownerships, obviously Turning Basin Labs as a co-op has been around for a while, but it feels like this is a moment, right? And we've got amazing people like Kirk, like Project Equity, doing work to proliferate the importance of these models, but it still feels like there's an opportunity to do more. So in this session, we're gonna speak to Kirk and hear about the options and how you do it and what it looks like, and also get a view from Kimberly, who is exploring how co-ops and shared ownership models might be able to support the work that she does. But I think what I'll do is I'll start with Kirk, and please, Kirk, if I've not done your introduction justice, add to it. But I guess my first question to you is, we've got an amazing group of people here listening in. Why should care about co-ops, or why should it be considered as a business model, either for their work or for their own businesses, or for whatever it might be? If I can ask you that, Kirk.
So I'd say there's 3 things to consider. So the first is the owner who's in place. Like, what are they trying to do? Like, they want to stay in the business, they want to exit the business, they want to retire, they just want to say, look, I'm done. They want to take care of their people. What are their priorities? What are their missions? What are their goals? The second would be to think about their employee base and what are their interests. Are these people that are just there to punch a clock? Are they engaged? Have they made their business successful? And then lastly is, what is the kind of political climate, or at least in the city where you are? Do they help small businesses in any way? Are there the economic development places that can help out in your city? Are there resources that you can turn to? And there are private ones that you can pay for, but sometimes cities actually have some SBDCs or other local kind of publicly accessible resources you can hit. The worker cooperative model, in our case, worked for us. And again, it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't solve all problems, but it is a solution to someone that wants to exit their business, or frankly wants to take less responsibility for themselves. And the thing about, there's a lot of misconceptions about what a co-op is. Is it like this hippie thing? Is it just agriculture? Is it just farm workers? Is it just, it's not understood well. And part of why I get it, my advocacy, and Stephen, why we initially connected, is we need to get the word out, which I appreciate being a participant in something like this to get the word out. And the real message here is co-ops are about equity. It's about keeping equity consistent for everyone, not just the owner, not the worker. No one gets sacrificed. It's all about what is fair and what is a reasonable solution to something. So if you're looking to sell your business and you don't want to just put it on the market, and frankly, it's going to be a rough choice if you're even trying that, especially in today's climate, unless it's going to get scooped up by some corporate asset firm consolidation or just parting it out. A co-op a worker co-op, for example, is an example of a solution that allows the business owner to have a structured sale, and the owners, the workers that would then become part of that owning group, to have control of that business long term, and hopefully in our case in perpetuity. So it provides a structure. We use the LLC structure. It's not some made up new thing you got to figure out. It uses existing legal structures in the tax code, and you can do interesting things with that. There's some tax advantages for owners. There's some incentives for owners, and I guess I would just encourage awareness and understanding to see if it fits people's goals on what they're trying to achieve. So it's a really long-winded response to you there, Stephen.
No, that's great, Kirk, and I want to come back to you because you're doing a lot of amazing work on this agenda in California and helping businesses and right at the state level even to think about how we support conversion, especially at this time. And so I want to come back to that. But Kimberly, I want to bring you into the discussion and hear more about the work at the coalition that you're leading. And I guess for me, the question really is, your work has traditionally been in the space of advocacy, right, and supporting the amazing domestic workers who are working up and down the state. Why has the coalition started to think about cooperative or shared ownership as a viable strategy, a part of your work? It'd be great to hear that.
Yeah. First, thank you so much for having us, for having me here today. Thank you, Stephen. I also just want to acknowledge the great work of the panel beforehand. Hearing from Leneka and Elsa was really inspiring. And the word I want to use is what Kirk just mentioned. I think the key word is equity for this conversation. The coalition has been working to advance the legal protections and dignity of the 300,000 domestic workers in California for a long time. Domestic workers are historically excluded from basic legal and health protections. Most of them are immigrant women and women of color. And over the last 10 years, the coalition has been working really hard to gain these legal protections through the California legislature and through policy. And the truth is that we've made some gains, but it's been moving slower than we would have hoped. And what has brought this conversation to a head for us is really this year, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, where domestic workers have been frontline workers, essential workers. We ran a campaign to win basic health and safety protections at the state level, and unfortunately, that did not happen. Our members were denied, and so it's the intersections of this COVID-19 pandemic, the current attacks on worker rights from major corporations, this anti-immigrant sentiment, and the racist attacks on people of color that has really gotten our members to think about how they can actually take control of their own destinies and really attain what Kirk just mentioned, equity for the work that they do. Our members have decided that we can't only depend on the government to ensure rights or ensure equity and protection, that workers actually need to be at the center of these conversations and need to make sure that they're setting standards for themselves, whether it be wages whether it be basic health and safety and other forms of dignity. So that's why this is very interesting concept for us. We know that our members need to be at the center of these conversations in order to set the standards themselves.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yeah, it's really powerful to hear kind of your journey, and it's kind of this whole piece right around equity, and I think for me and from the perspective of Tony Basin Labs, it just turns this question of just like organizing, and kind of using the power of many to try and secure what's right for workers. So yeah, I want to pick up on that. Kirk, I just wonder if you could just give us a little insight into some of the work you've been driving, particularly in Santa Clara, around trying to push, again, the kind of co-op shared ownership model, just so that people know that kind of work and where they might be able to learn more about it.
Sure, I'll just give a brief overview. So last year we presented to the city. We're headquartered in the city of Santa Clara. A slice of New York is the city of Santa Clara. We have a location also in Sunnyvale, but in Santa Clara, we're both shops are in Santa Clara County, the county of Santa Clara. In the city of Santa Clara, which is where we're headquartered, we started talking to their economic development, marketing, communications committee, made a presentation about cooperatives in general. That was in March of last year. And advanced the discussion to the council level and had a study session. And that study session in July was then turned back, unanimous support from city council, really well received, had a bunch of experts in industry and other co-ops present to the council and city staff. And then they put that back to that committee. And then in that committee, they decided not only to support the worker cooperative initiative inside the city of Santa Clara, but they also funded it. And the key message here is funded. They invested $100,000 into this program without having any infrastructure, any knowledge, or any awareness of really what this was, other than what they've learned through this process. So within about a 6 or 7 month window, we went from basic advocating to funding and delivering resources to do something like that. And that just, I hear in talking to other technical assistance providers, it takes years to move the government to do anything. It takes 3 years to get a resolution or an ordinance or whatever. This is, if you have an executive champion or a sponsor or someone that you can connect with in your community, ideally a city council member, a mayor, city staff that can help get you the right visibility, I think things can move very quickly, because once something's prioritized, it can happen. And this is a testament that it can happen. And so Santa Clara is moving that forward. At the state level, we just had state and federal, I'll say, we had a roundtable just this past September, about a month and a half ago, with Representative Rokana, Congressman Rokana, held a roundtable with Assemblyman Raj Kalra and Mayor Lisa Gilmore in the city of Santa Clara, Democracy at Work Institute, Project Equity, and myself, to talk about worker cooperatives and also to introduce some federal legislation that Congressman Khanna is working on and will hopefully be releasing in the next month or so, that takes the Main Street Employee Ownership Act of 2018 is the next step forward from that. So the Main Street Act was the first step, gave a bunch of credibility at the SBA direction. This is the next step in that journey. And that's really what I'm working at state level, working, tangentially to the federal level, but at the local level, where that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where activity actually can happen, and you start making changes. And this pandemic has accelerated all the challenges we had before the pandemic, and all the systemic issues and problems that we had. They're just compounded and exacerbated. And so this is the time, we can move the needle drastically, not just incrementally move, but we can make advancements 10, 20, what would take 10, 20 years to do in a very short, and maybe measured in months or a year, because of the condition that we're in. And I think it's our opportunity now is to advocate for what those areas are, what the policies need to be to represent the kind of work environment and kind of social structure around business that we need to come out of this recession or economy deficit we're in now.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. And I think just listening to you there, it just actually makes me realize one thing, which is, I think this model of of co-op, of shared ownership, I think this value set of wanting to kind of center workers at the heart of an investment fund or how you run a business. I think we see this not only as a good and a moral thing to do, but it's good business. Right, it's good business, it's good growth. The evidence around the world is showing more and more that when you set yourself up in this way, you actually see more productivity, more staff retention, and more in the bottom line as well. So,
and I'll just add one. Let me just add one thing to that. I mean, if you're an owner in a business, are you looking for your next job? If it's your company, you trying to figure out where you're going to go next. No, you are focused on making your environment productive, good, and successful. And that's the difference of what, at least in a worker cooperative model, there are other forms of employee ownership. But in a worker cooperative model, like, I'm equal to everybody else that's there. I don't have a majority share. I don't get to make the call and say, oh, I got 51%. No. I'm equally owned just by everybody else. Like, there's 13 or 12 of us. I own 7.6% of the company, just like everybody else does. My vote is equal to everybody else's. One person, one vote. And that democratic kind of ownership and responsibility, people like to see, I just need more money. I just want more money. And yes, you need to have money so that you can actually let your brain think. Because if you're struggling to pay the bills and you can't see the road, if you can't see what's 3 feet in front of you, you can't see what's down the road. But if you can get through that and you can get a little beyond the tactical, I need to survive mode, you can actually have a strategy on how do you grow and sustain your business and take care of the people that are there, because that's what the co-op does. It's designed to take care of the people, not a person. It's the people in the organization. And it's not some hokey socialism thing. It's nothing like that. We're very competitive, very capitalistic, driven business. And we compete, and we are not, we're not fooling around like that. But the difference is the outcomes of that go into the people, not just a pocket.
Thank you. It's great. And Kimberly, just thinking now even a bit more broadly beyond the kind of co-op and shared ownership model, just you articulated so eloquently earlier around the supports that are needed for domestic workers. Just in your view, what type of supports are needed from kind of government, educational institutions, training providers to support better job quality and worker voice in California today? What do we need to see coming from government, educational institutions, and training providers?
Well, I think that really having government support worker-owned models would be a wonderful first step. Really taking the time to do some research and in terms of like how industries like the domestic worker industry can actually grow into locally, really invest in models, test them out. I think really investing in workforce development I understand from other folks that I hear in the field, there's just not enough investment, in this area. So really prioritizing that as investment so that this work of domestic work, people say it's essential, people say it's frontline work, but it is dignified work, and it makes all other work possible. And it should be considered that, so creating these models that Kirk has already worked on and been successful at, like really providing examples and educating us on how we can actually grow to scale or test these models out and really invest in the communities that you all have been discussing about from the earlier research that you've done, like putting workers at the center would really be a wonderful first step.
Great, thank you. No, I appreciate that. And staying with you, Kimberly, just, as you start to think about the potential of how a co-op or shared ownership model could support or empower your workers, what are your thoughts? What are your, what are you going to do next, or how are you going to try and make that happen?
Thanks for the question, Stefan. It's like, I really think it would be wonderful to research, do the research with the industry, find out how other folks in related industries are succeeding. There is actually so much knowledge on the ground in terms of like what domestic workers already do. As I mentioned, we're a coalition of organizations across the state. Many of our organizations are worker centers, day labor centers that already have best practices, that are already creating equity for immigrant women workers. Tap into some of that knowledge. And learn from the work that Kirk is doing, and bring this together to actually create models that we can actually grow to scale. We can start at the local level and see how that works and grow them out. But this is a good first step in terms of like setting the groundwork for future success. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got one last question for you both, and we're going to move into the final session. I think when people do hear about co-ops and shared ownership models, sometimes there can be a little bit of, it's a little bit hokey pokey over there, and you're never going to get something that's big or it's going to grow. So I don't know. I'm interested in both of your views on just like, how do we scale this stuff, right? Like, how do we get a rideshare business that is cooperatively owned, but that is operating across California or across the US? How do we get the co-op or shared model to scale? And sorry, maybe I'm asking a difficult question there, but Kirk, I wonder if you could just close us out with your thoughts on that. Mr. Kirk.
Yeah, so I tried to click on mute. So a couple things I would say. So first, when you talk about scale, co-op scale, you look at Mondragon over in Spain. They have 80,000 person co-ops, and half their GDP is driven by cooperative businesses. The largest one in New York is a couple thousand. I think they go up to tens of thousands. I mean, it doesn't scale whether it's 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 2,000. Co-ops can handle whatever scale you need. My biggest challenge to everybody here that you reach in these kinds of meetings and presentations is awareness. Without awareness, without knowing these types of financial validated business models, if they don't know they exist, they're never going to happen. It's like the question that never gets asked, never gets answered. It's that same kind of thing. If we don't collectively strive to educate and inform people about what this model even looks like, or that it even exists, people don't. You don't learn this in school. It's not like you grow up in your grade school or high school learning about what co-ops are. You might hear about it. You might have a little farm stand. You might, ancillary information. I mean, in New York City, I grew up in a co-op. Literally, my building was a co-op, and I didn't even know what that meant. Right? I just shares in the building, but I don't know, whatever. Until we have and I would call a campaign level awareness, deliberate action to inform our country. Start at the little, small, and work your way out. I'm looking at the state level, California level, have a funded campaign to raise awareness of what this is, and then provide the resources so that people can learn more and understand what it means to be in an owned business. So what does that mean? Like, how can that help city? I mean, this is in the city's interest. It's going to help them sustain and maintain their businesses, make them more resilient, make them more equitable. It helps business owners find a way out of their business because their kids don't want their business most of the time, or they can't sell it. And it helps the people provide a stable work environment and one they care about. So like all three areas that everybody can benefit from that if they know about it. But if they don't know about it, the classic ways are going to exist. So my opinion is if we message this correctly, things will be better, and we will get on the right path. But we have not messaged this successfully at all. And the best kept secret is a crappy solution. This should not be a secret. It should not be a little niche thing. This is mainstream. It's not fringe. The federal government backs this as empowered SBA to educate on it. And we just need to push the throttle and just keep going.
Love that. Love that. Kimberly, any final thoughts on this question of scale?
Wouldn't it be great to set up a worker-owned office at the state level? Those are my last words.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a powerful suggestion, actually. As some of you can probably hear, I'm originally from the UK, and I did a lot of work with UK government, regional and central. And we'd always say that actually, if you want to get something done, create a functioning government, stick a couple of civil servants, and it will start happening. So, and actually, that's a great segue into our final conversation with Anna. And Julie and Marty. And so I'm going to thank the panel, thank the amazing chat that is going on in the chat box, and amazing people making their contributions. But I'm going to hand over to Anna to bring us home. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, everybody. Let me just start off by thanking all of you in this virtual space for creating a place where I feel like I can show up as my full self. This chat, so both the chat and the actual conversations that we're hearing, really bring me back to, I think, what unifies all of us and what unifies us in this panel that that I get the pleasure of facilitating here, which is that we are all people who are trying to, and I'll tell you, I was a teacher. I started out as a teacher, but the idea of how do you support students, how do you support community members, and how do you support workers, for me, we're all one. And so I just wanted to give a big shout out to just all of you for your engagement and participation. And Kimberly, in those powerful last words, we hear this idea of office of worker ownership and what that could look like. And so now we really think about this idea of, policy implications, state role. And before we go into all of that, there is a question here for the audience. Please use the chat as you have been. What about these shared ownership models resonates with you? What do you want to learn more about? So that we can kind of take all of this and follow up with all of you and design those conversations forthcoming. But let me turn it around and introduce this. This part of the conversation is really trying to look at what policies put workers at the center, really to try to scale strategies that improve job quality. And it's a question really about the role that the state can have, the role that we can all have as partners in really creating more of those enabling conditions to see this type of, whether they're worker ownership models or worker power, worker voice efforts that we heard about in the first two panels today. So how do we make that a reality? Well, today I am joined, my great privilege to be joined by Marty Shaw, who was one of the team of worker researchers from Trinity Basin Labs, and our own labor secretary, Julie Sue. And today we're going to start, I'm going to kick us off by really anchoring us with the worker research, which is, I think, the ongoing thread here, what we've learned from talking with workers themselves. And I'll start with Marty. Marty, reflecting on your research and your own experience during COVID-19, getting laid off, joining us in really doing this work. Can you tell us a little bit about why you feel it's important for worker voices to be in these conversations about job quality and economic recovery?
Yes, thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. I've found out that there aren't many options. People in, underpaid, low-income jobs have had to sacrifice pride in some instances to merely survive. Why not value people enough to give them work? Yes, but value them in their work. Allow them to feel a part of something so that they are vested in their jobs. People in the job market now feel pretty hopeless. And if they are working, they're scared of losing their jobs. A sentiment I heard often was, why am I going to speak up? Nothing's going to be done about it. And yes, they felt that in their work, but I heard it a lot even in this research project when approaching people in my community and even friends from the fitness industry, because that's my background. I heard the same thing. Why would I participate in this kind of research? Nothing's going to be done about it. And so there is that sense of hopelessness. And then in some cases, fear. They're like, well, who's going to get this information? Are you going to use my name? You know, my boss can't hear about it. I don't want to be involved, because they didn't want the fear of losing the job that they had. So that was quite an eye-opener for me in even doing the research. We have a sense of pride in the work that we do. Generally, we would love to feel that way. But when you're treated poorly, you resign yourself to merely making a living. And you aren't vested into your work because you don't matter as a person. So that's where the topic of empowerment came in. Some of the people I interviewed found that concept laughable. Empowerment, really? They never even considered that in any of their job experiences. So for me, you know, coming from the fitness industry, and I love my job, did it for years, I felt empowered in my work. It was a sense of emotional ownership. It wasn't, you know, I didn't own my business, but I felt empowered in my work. That is something that a majority of people that I was looking to get involved in this research did not experience at any level. And even for me, when I did lose my job due to COVID, the gyms were closed. So I went into work one morning and there's a sign at the door, contact unemployment. You no longer have a job, you know, because of COVID. So that was like, wow, what do I do now? Sure, contact unemployment. That's not an easy process. It was done, yes, but it was quite frightening because then I had to look at work that I would have never considered otherwise, simply because it just wasn't necessary for me. But I found myself in places where I was treated poorly. You know, I was belittled. And so that is what made this work so passionate for me in this research, because that was an experience I felt once recently, but that's an experience that a lot of people feel on a daily basis and have for years because there are no options for them. There's nothing to dig them, to help them come out of the hole, is what I tend to use it at. So anyway, quite opening in that sense. Thank you.
Marty, thank you so much for those reflections. You know, in that vein, I think this next question is for Secretary Sue. You know, we just kind of heard Marty walk us through these points about really really job quality and worker voice and the feelings of disempowerment. I am sure that new things, as Marty mentioned, but it was new to you and seeing how big and widespread those feelings are across the folks that you interviewed. So, Secretary, can you tell us a little bit about, from your position at the state level, how you're seeing those, those models, how you are thinking about these models of whether it's employer ownership or worker co-op models, but just these new models that can improve or have the possibility of improving job quality and building worker voice and worker power.
Yes, Anna, thank you so much. Thank you for your facilitation here. Thank you to leadership of JFF and TBL, to Joel and Stephen. I think your voices are so critical. Your vision is also so critical. Joel started this with good jobs have to be the foundation of our economy, and not just because it's the right thing to do and not just because it's good for workers, but because it does make for a strong and more resilient economy. And then just Stephen's statement about, the soul of America is its working people, and working people need to have a say in policies and how capital flows and the like. It's just, really important to center our conversation on that. So I thought maybe what I would do, because I don't want to just repeat what's been said, and so much has been said is powerful. It's what I believe, it's what we've been working on. I'll maybe frame this with, I think there are 3 myths or assumptions that I really want to break down. One is this idea that low wage jobs are low wage just because it has to be that way, right? That somehow there's something inherent about some types of work where workers have to work long hours, still live in poverty, and endure, conditions that are really beneath what we would say is, is a guarantee of human dignity. And I think that is problematic, and we have to consistently remind ourselves of why those jobs are the way that they are, right? And one of the things, we talk about oftentimes is we saw at the turn of the century that manufacturing jobs were these really dangerous, long hours. There were children working in them. There was, lack of all kinds of safety and overtime protections. And through a combination of things, including union power, through workers speaking out, through increased attention to how horrific the conditions were, and through policy and legislation, we helped to, bring those jobs up, and created policies that improved the lives of workers themselves, doing that in conjunction with government and unions and others. So that's to Kimberly's point, right, about who does domestic work. Protections. Why are farm workers excluded? Well, let's look at who has done farm work historically and present day. So I think it's important for us to remember that, we really have to center equity on this work, not just because there's so much attention to equity now, but because we got to this point because of systemic racism, sexism, exclusion, and other things that we have to do better. The second myth I just want to address is this tension that somehow if we want to be innovative, we have to sacrifice worker well-being, right? That all of us who talk all the time about, worker power, how we need to protect workers, that somehow we're not being innovative enough. And there's absolutely no inherent reason why that's the case, right? And to that point, I think it connects to some of the messages in the chat, is that there's no inherent tension between flexibility and employee status with employee protections. I think we just, we need to challenge that notion in all of what we talk about. And I think this conversation about worker co-ops is very much at the intersection of what is innovative is good for working people. And we need to make that more of how we look at all of our solutions. And finally, there's just no reason why workers should be presented with no job or a bad job, right? That's a choice. And I think especially as we are recovering from economic, this pandemic-induced economic crisis, we have to be loud and constant about saying that those two are not the only choices. They're not the choices that we're going to force on working people or on all of us as a society. So I want to just amplify what we've been saying, like that we need worker voice. Workers need a voice and a choice, right? Marty, that's to your point, right? That, we see in the pandemic, like workers need a choice to stay home when they're sick, right? And not have to choose between their lives and their livelihoods, but we need a choice in so many bigger ways. So that's what this conversation is. I'm really grateful to be a part of it. And I'll just say that at the state level, we have been looking more at employee ownership, worker co-op models, and the like. And part of that is, this has already been said, but it's a really powerful model for not just better wages, but better wealth, right? Wealth, focusing on wealth equity issues. And we talk about low wages and income inequality, but we also should be talking about wealth inequality, which is in many ways even more entrenched and astounding. And I think this is one way to address that. And it is a way to address the small business transition, right? Kirk said this, you'll say it better than I could ever say it, but there is a time, especially again coming out of the pandemic, where we do have small businesses who are not going to want to reopen in the way that they were before. And in fact, many of them were trying to think about their succession plan before the pandemic hit. So this is it's a model that we want to look at, we want to invest in. And as I will say, as the labor secretary, we want to partner with those of you on this call about it. I've been in conversations with some of you about it. Let me just say one last thing about a challenge, which is, I think this goes back to Elsa's point and Leneka's earlier points, is I do think that we need to hear workers, and we also need to think about what we are saying about this model, right? I've worked with workers before where this idea of ownership it can feel empowering, but it can also connote burdens and financial risks that aren't viewed as desirable. So I think there's a whole bunch. It's not just kind of the public campaign we need to do, but we really need to invest in the supports that are required to make sure that these kind of models can work.
And that's actually, I'd like to pick up on that point, because part of the, what all of the conversations are going to include when we talk about economic recovery is small business support. And even in your reflections, there is a little bit of of kind of a call out, can that be an opportunity for rebuilding? So we know that the state is launching the SEED program, which is a $10 million investment that provides micro grants and entrepreneurial training to individuals facing significant barriers to employment. Secretary, can you tell us a little bit about that opportunity, what the aspiration is for that investment, and how the state plans to kind of roll that out?
Yeah.
How can folks on this call tap into those resources?
Thank you so much, Anna. So we know, $10 million is the beginning, right? It's really, it itself is a seed, right, of what is really needed. But SEED stands for Social Entrepreneurs for Economic Development. And the idea is exactly as you said, to provide micro grants and entrepreneurial training to basically immigrants, for people who face significant barriers to employment. That is, people who are limited English proficient, people who may not have a status so that they can, that they can get work authorization. So really the idea behind it, the reason why the governor wanted to do it is because we have seen the devastating impact on our undocumented populations during this pandemic, right? They were not eligible for unemployment insurance by federal law. There were oftentimes, frontline workers, as well as, in industries like hospitality and retail, who lost jobs. So the SEED is meant to try to fill that gap. We are currently in the process of standing is that we will partner with community-based organizations who have the ties to these communities that we seek to serve, in order to both push out the grants and also to provide the technical training that is needed in order for those who receive the grants to really succeed. And the idea is, it's not investing necessarily in the entrepreneurs who are already entrepreneurial, right? We know that immigrant entrepreneurship has been a powerful driver for economic growth. It's really a worker strategy. So looking at, what barriers workers face, what issues workers have in terms of gaining a foothold, gaining financial security, gaining a secure job, and looking at opportunities for that.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Marty, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think listening to the secretary speak here, and given the deep dive research you were involved in, how can or why should the state or other organizations use the research you did to design solutions for workers?
Well, job quality equals economic recovery, essentially. Nothing can succeed without the worker doing the work. And the quality of their work is in direct correlation to the pride they feel in doing it. So let me share a little personal experience that I've had. Most of you, again, I've been in the fitness industry for 32 years. I worked for 24 Hour Fitness. So I'm going to just share a little story in regards to 24-hour fitness in relation to worker power. I worked for 24-Hour Fitness for almost 20 years. It's a place that I was proud of working at, and most of my coworkers were very proud to say I work at 24-Hour Fitness. And, back in the day, it was the premier, fitness facility. Big company with clubs all over America. They were expanding into Asia. They were looking at opening sites in South America. They had TV contracts here in the States, Biggest Loser. Some of you guys remember all of that. 24-Hour Fitness started with humble beginnings. Just a guy and a few of his friends loved fitness, bought out Nautilus and started 24-Hour Fitness. It was a worker-centered business at first because the owners loved fitness and they realized that in order for that to work, the importance should be on the workers. The quality of their staff had a direct correlation with the success of their business. They valued their staff and their staff was grateful. Great pay, great benefits, great perks, great incentives. I even went to Europe on a trip I won with 24-Hour Fitness. We had access to the owners. We were able to speak to the owners, share ideas with the owners, upcoming changes or challenges. It's a great place to be. The company was a huge success. But as they got bigger, they changed ownerships a few times. The owners changed hands and ideas, and every time it changed, the workers were not benefited. The owners always changed things, but at every change, the benefits were always for the owners themselves, so that money went into their pockets at the expense of the quality of service and staff. So turnover became commonplace at 24 Hour Fitness. Staff that had made the company great started leaving and going to other fitness facilities. My friends would call me, and again, 20 years is a long time, and they would be like, come on, Marty, leave 24 Hour, come to this place because it's like 24 Hour used to be. So my question now, long story short, where's 24 Hour Fitness right now? They just declared bankruptcy this summer. And again, coming from the worker concept, I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons, but as a worker of a company, and I was there many years, I find it a direct correlation to how the workers were treated and at what expense did that company get bigger. So when a company succeeds, a company or an organization really, it is not because someone's at the top demanding or demeaning their workers. It's because they value the workforce by recognizing that they would not be a success without them. So if you invest in your workforce, you will succeed. And that was a lesson I've learned recently through all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I'm hearing just some great reflections. Investing in your workers is investing in your bottom line. And I think that your description nails that point. We heard from Secretary Sue talking about, these myths that are out there. Jobs don't have to be low-wage jobs. Innovation doesn't assume exploitation or require it. And there is a false dichotomy between having no job or having to take a bad job. And I think in, kind of pulling this all together, I'll turn this next question over to you, Julie. What are some of your reflections based on this conversation, the points that people are making? What would you want attendees here to take away from what we've heard? And, as you've mentioned, your office has been doing a lot of work on this. How be a partner? Is there a call to action that you would want to share with them?
Right. Thank you again, Anna. So I guess I will just really echo what Marty just said. I think she just made the point so beautifully, right, about, at the bottom line, what we need to do. I also just want to acknowledge Project Equity, right? They've really been really a great resource for us in government as we try to figure out how we can be partners in this effort. I think that, for me, a lot of the question is, how does government partner with and support these kinds of innovations that are really necessary? And frankly, many of them are already happening, and government's kind of late to the game, right? And so are there ways that we can drive investments, including workforce investments? Are there ways that we can remove barriers, right, that might be in place, either because government just hasn't thought about it or because we're not communicating well enough across government? So those are some of the things that we have started in our efforts that I'm looking forward to sharing as we bring them to fruition. I'll say one other thing. I do think that when it comes to all of these efforts, but certainly for government, we can't depend on things just sort of happening, by chance or by accident. And it shouldn't be so hard for advocates who are doing the right thing to advocate for these kinds of changes. So one of my real commitments is, how do we, build government, build this infrastructure of government to support these kinds of efforts. So we have had, since I assumed this position, an effort to try to align all of the different workforce systems into one department. We're calling that the Department of Better Jobs and Higher Wages. And so the idea is that, we want to, somebody said this earlier, you can't sort of measure, you can't fix what you don't measure, you can't answer questions you don't ask. And it's to really look at how can our whole workforce system do better to address the many challenges that we face and all the inequities that we've talked about. And I will just be really honest, in the beginning, I had not thought about that new department really addressing this idea of worker cooperatives and worker ownership. But over the last 10 months in addressing the pandemic and the economic crisis, this has become a really important strategy for me and for us as a state too. So while it's not going to be everything that was talked about, just like $10 million is not all of the resources that are needed for SEED, it is just to share a step in the direction of making sure that government is genuinely at the table and inviting the right people to the table to try to make the kinds of changes that we're talking about, and to make it easier to do these things that are the right things to do, beyond talking about them in forums where we have a lot of like-minded people. I'm really intent on figuring out how we move the levers of government to try to make these things easier to do and a greater reality in California.
Thank you, and thank you to Marty for sharing the research that you did, and dovetailing that with the real lived experiences that you faced and so many others are facing. We have 5 minutes left, and part of what really wanted to do was take an opportunity, if we can go to the next slide, to just wrap up some of what we've heard. I think the first thing is that, when we talk about JFF and certainly our work here in California, inclusive regional economic development, what you heard today in these three conversations, starting with the idea of career is a privilege. And that is not something that a lot of people enter into that with. What is career? Really unpacking the inherent privilege in that question. We start there and we go all the way to what are these new models that can help people build wealth, that can help people build power, and can help people be in a position to partner in economic recovery. So when we talk about it in action, it really is about partnership. If we can go to the next slide, please. We also talked a lot about what quality jobs are. And part of what we wanted to do that Stephen kind of laid out at the beginning with this research is use research as a tool for empowerment. And I think that the worker researchers that presented today, you all heard a lot of empowerment, even in the process of doing that work. So for us, it's really a call to action of how else can we leverage this information? How else can we push out what we're learning and create these new systems for the 21st century in a way that creates inclusive outcomes. And those inclusive economic outcomes are the thing we will be chasing, at least in I can only say for myself, probably my entire life. But part of what I think that I would, share with you all are the ways in which we can do something. I can tell you that as someone who was a teacher for a long time and was really all about even in my research experience, all about work-based learning, I just want to thank, the worker researchers for even elevating how empowering work-based learning is. I know that there are folks on the in the audience today that do a lot of that by trade, by love, by all of the things that people are talking about. But the importance of that is just huge. So, JFF, we always say we have these kind of four main strategies. I think they're a good frame to end us today. JFF designs, JFF influences, JFF scales, and JFF invests. And I think that those are four strategies that all of us probably can enter into in terms of continuing this work. So there are things that you all can do with us or we can do with you in the spirit of partnership. One is to join the Future Ready California Network. If you are not already, if you have not joined, or if you want to know more about it, please reach out to us. We're probably through that network who hosted this conversation. We will be doing more on this topic in California. Learn, share resources. I can't tell you how much I appreciated the sharing that's happening on the chat. And those resources are invaluable in equipping and empowering us to be agents of change in this work. We can pilot. I mean, I think part of what was the big lesson here is that the co-design, putting workers, placing them at the center of a rebuilding agenda means they are co-designers. We are supporting and learning with them as they pilot more worker-driven solutions. And then I think Stephen spoke to it, and our ambition is very transparent, and we want to invest. We want to invest in these models that can help us in building an inclusive economy, that can help us to get closer toward that equity goal that sometimes feels so out of reach, but it is our work. It is what a lot of us gets us up in the morning. And I think all of you have an opportunity in your positions to do something. You already are. And the more that we can help and be a vehicle or support you or partner with you, we're on that same jam with y'all. So I will say that it has been an incredible, invigorating conversation for me to be a part of this, but I would be remiss without thanking those folks that put on this event, from our events team to Alison and Stephen, their vision for sharing this information, for leading Karen V, who I know just played such a huge integral part of the worker research team. But this is just the beginning. This is something that we need, that we believe, and that we're really learning from in terms of how do you create regional prosperity? What does inclusive economic development look like? And we just look forward to partnering with you guys moving forward. There are things in the chat in terms of you can click on the link and answer to it. But yeah, again, thank you all so much for your participation, your engagement, and your energy, and we'll see you the next time. Thanks so much.